Pleasure to be here today to welcome you all to our conversation introducing the Alumni Life Design Experience. My name is Casey Miller. I'm the Executive Director of Hopkins Connect. This conversation will highlight a new offering for our alumni community, an upcoming 4-week Odyssey course launching in June and running from June 20th to July 20th. The Alumni Life Design Experience course will help JHU alumni better understand their strengths, skills, and values, identify multiple potential career paths to pursue, leverage effective career resources to help alumni achieve their goals, and build lasting relationships with peers. The Life Design Experience came from an idea that I had in a conversation with my boss, Dr. Farouk Day. We were finishing my annual review and just kind of shooting the breeze and thinking big about ways that we could make audacious moves, and we came up with this notion of giving back to and supporting alumni through life design skills and experiences. Unfortunately, as one of the pioneers of this program, Dr. Farouk Day is unable to join us, but he has graciously recorded an introductory message he'd like to share with you all.
I'm Farouk Day, Vice Provost for Integrative Learning and Life Design at Johns Hopkins University, and I am thrilled to introduce Hopkins at Home for our alumni community at Johns Hopkins. We realized a while back at Johns Hopkins that practically everyone, students, alumni, and other community members within our university, have wrestled at one point or another, or continue to wrestle with the question, what do I want to do with my life? It is the universal question that everyone asks. And the traditional methods that have been used in university have proven not to work. They are to predict what one will be in the future and then draw a straight line to that job or that career or that life trajectory. We've flipped the formula at Johns Hopkins University and implemented a university-wide approach that we are calling life design. It's essentially encouraging everyone to focus on their curiosity today rather than predicting an unimaginable goal in the future. We decided to go all in on this approach and have rolled this out for all of our undergraduate students, our graduate students, our alumni, and our entire campus community. It's been a very successful endeavor so far. I think we also realized that alumni start to wrestle with this question all over again a few years after they land their first job. They're in it, they're excited, they start to build new skills, build new networks, and then a few years later, the question comes back, what am I here for and what do I want to do? Life design is here for students, but also for all of our alumni community in Johns Hopkins. It's one thing to have a philosophy of life design that is there to inspire people, students and alumni alike, to have a different mindset about their lives and careers. It's another to create an actual framework, an environment, and a curriculum that provides them with sort of the safety to experiment with those ideas in community. And that's why we thought that having this delivered in format of a course that provides the guidance of a teacher, bring people who have similar interests and questions into one environment, and give them the time and space to explore these ideas. What does it mean to get curious and to really dig deep into that curiosity? You know, I've always believed that once a Blue Jay, always a Blue Jay, and once you enroll in this university, you might graduate from the day of commencement, but truly you never graduate. You're a lifelong learner, you're a lifetime member of this great community of ours, We are 200,000 alumni strong. So our aim at Johns Hopkins is that we're delivering this type of approach not only to students but to our entire network of alumni, so that it becomes the thing that you just do at Johns Hopkins. You don't just come here to receive great education and build great networks, but to design your life effectively and build a fulfilling life.
Thank you so much, Farouk. And with that, I'd like to shift over to today's speakers, Michael Gonzalez, Janine Tucker, and Bill Kirst. Michael Gonzalez has been a part of JHU's Office of Integrated Learning and Life Design, ILLD, since fall 2019, supporting students in exploring how their major may align with their industries and fields of interest through curriculum design scaffolding, teaching courses, and tailored advising. Before joining ILLD, Michael was an administrator and faculty at Bennington College and Hampshire College, respectively. Michael's academic background is in urban and architectural theory, having completed graduate coursework at University of California, Berkeley, and plans on completing his PhD dissertation in summer 2023. Michael has a BA in Architectural Studies from University of California, Riverside. Janine Tucker spent 29 years teaching communication, teamwork, and leadership skill sets to her players as the head women's lacrosse coach at Johns Hopkins University before becoming the Director of Development for Special Projects at Hopkins. In this role, she supports the Hopkins alumni base through meaningful engagement and unique opportunities to enhance the alumni experience. Janine has written 6 books on coaching and brings her knowledge of perseverance, motivation, and uplifting others to the Alumni Life Design Experience. And finally, an extra special welcome to alumnus Bill Kirst. As a change management expert, Bill Kirst leads organizations through change with compassion and care. He has worked across a breadth of industries and has helped dozens of clients achieve transformational goals. Bill's passion for creativity and innovation runs over into his podcast, Coffee and Change, where his guests share insights on managing change in their daily lives. He's a creative writer, a storyteller, and a polyglot, having studied 6 languages during his international travels. He currently resides in Seattle and, alongside his work, focuses on wellness and mindfulness in his daily life. Bill is a U.S. Army veteran, having served 10 years as a reserve officer in the United States Army. Bill is actively involved in numerous veterans programs, working with minority veterans and those dealing with PTS. He has a bachelor's degree from Johns Hopkins University and a master's degree from Georgetown. We also want to highlight that Bill is a dedicated Hopkins volunteer and sits on the Johns Hopkins University Alumni Council and Board. Thank you, Bill, for both being with us today and everything you do for the university. Now, without further ado, I'd like to turn the mic over to Michael, who will be guiding us through today's conversation.
Thank you, Casey. It's much appreciated. I'm happy to be here to showcase the wonderful work our team has been doing in designing a mini course that, in essence, will support alumni in exploring their aspirations as it relates to their career prospects. Before I talk about the different modules that are tied to the Alumni Life Design Experience, I'd love to discuss or share how this process came about. The course, in essence, is derived from a course that we had designed at the Life Design Lab 3 years ago for undergraduate students who were interested in wanting to explore their majors in relationship to internship opportunities. And over the course of these 3 years, we've been able to refine and develop a series of modules and exercises that not only helps undergrads explore what they'd like to do and become post-grad, but also it gives us an opportunity to see how this can actually support Hopkins alumni as well. And all of this is based on design thinking principles. But the modules that you see here, in essence, is a much more accessible approach to how we think design thinking can support our participants in a very convenient and easy way. So as you see here, the modules are being curious, imagining possible lives, building connections, and telling your story. And that's going to happen, or these topics are going to be shared and discussed over the course of our month together this summer. So what we're going to do today is essentially do a test run of how this course is going to be implemented this summer through the insights of Bill, Janine, and Casey. We've developed a series of questions that align with these 4 modules, and it's our hope that our responses to these questions will elicit a level of curiosity that hopefully will transfer onto how you're reflecting, thinking, and eventually taking action on how you'd like to imagine your career pathways moving forward. So the first module is being curious. And there's an exercise in the Being Curious module that is focused and centered around articulating values. We tend to take so much time focusing on our daily lives that we don't take the time to actually take a step back and see how our values can actually inform how we move forward. So it's our hope that this course will actually give you the time to do that. And articulating your values allows for the unpacking of what matters to you, right? It's essentially the baseline through which we move forward in this world. And the second is that it provides us an anchor point for understanding our past, our present, and our future experiences with intention in mind, right? And then the last is that it offers an opportunity to explore the connection between your personal and professional values. So that bridge is something that we find important at the Life Design Lab and through ALDE. So these are the first 2 sets of questions I'd like to entertain Bill, Janine, and Casey. The first is, name and describe a value that has undergirded your life experience. How does it show up in your life? Bill?
Sure.
I have this list here.
Yeah, sure, Michael. I appreciate the opportunity to share. I think one of the ones that really jumps out to me is probably a combination of altruism and empathy. When I think back to the pathways and roads that led me to where I'm at in my career, and the sort of, like you said, the anchor points that keep me going, I think a lot about empathy. As you mentioned, and as Casey mentioned sort of at the intro, I have the honor of leading other people through change. And that is a unique gift to have. I know Janine can relate, right, with guiding young people as a coach through decades of growth and transformation. So for me, I think the one I really pull on is empathy. And then how that comes to life is through altruism, is wanting to leave a place better than you found it, for me.
Great, thank you, Bill. Janine?
Thanks, Michael. That's awesome. And I agree with what Bill was saying as far as when we're thinking about others for my values. But something I wanted to share really quick before I spoke about my values is just reiterating what you mentioned earlier, Michael, about the reason behind taking this course. And that is, we worry about everyone else in our lives, and we rarely are super present for ourselves. So what I'm hopeful for in designing this course and helping Casey design this course is that each of our participants will honor themselves and will make themselves a priority in the sessions that we're carving out in June and July, and take that time to prioritize yourself and really think through what's going to be meaningful for your next step. And for me, I actually had a chance to do this when life design, the concept of life design, first came to Hopkins. And when I looked back at my notes, one of the things that I was hoping I might be doing in my next chapter, I'm actually doing. So it revolved around values of teamwork and joy. So I did have 2, Bill, as well. Teamwork has always been a very important part of my life. I'm the oldest of 4 children, so my parents really beat that into my head about taking care of my siblings, and then just bringing joy. I get a lot of that from my mom, and those 2 values have been really important to me. But I'm super excited for everybody on this little webinar right now, because being able to prioritize yourself and think about what you want to do that's going to make you happy in your next chapter brings me a lot of joy. So thanks, Michael, for letting me share all that.
Thank you, Janine.
Mhm.
How about you, Casey?
So I would say one of the values that's undergirded my life experience has been curiosity. And I'm endlessly fascinated by things that I'm just learning about. When I hear someone and they're doing a job that I've always wondered about, or they are doing a job that I've never heard about before, I just pester them with questions like, tell me about that. How'd you get into that? What, what's a day-to-day like? What are some of the, major things that you've accomplished in that position? And then that just gets my gears turning in terms of like, how does that relate to other roles, positions, people, things like that. So it's no wonder that I got into the line of work that I got into, where I get to talk to alumni all the time, and I get to help alumni connect to student mentees, because I hear someone saying something that they do, and I immediately think, oh, they need to talk to this student, or this student needs to talk to this alum because of the connections that I see between what they do. I've started calling myself a net weaver, because I help bring people together in that way. So yeah, curiosity. I think curiosity with people, curiosity with work, curiosity with world is, it's just always been there.
Thank you, Casey. That's a fantastic segue to our second question related to curiosity. We oftentimes focus on the strengths and the values that we've been able to refine and craft over these years after graduating from Hopkins, for example, that we tend to lean on to it versus actually taking the time to actually explore values that we haven't necessarily taken the time to do. So with that in mind, I'd love for the 3 of you to unpack this question for me. Can you name and describe a value that you'd like to explore further, that you haven't necessarily been able to explore in the past? And how do you think a course like the Alumni Life Design Experience would help you and others do that?
Yeah, Michael, I love this question because my answer might surprise people. Mine would be bravery. And the reason I say that is because bravery comes in many forms, and sort of at the heart of bravery is courage. But we have to remember that even the root word of courage is cœur in French, which means heart, right? So full heart. And yes, I was in the military for 10 years, and there's certainly courage and bravery that goes into that. But I think about the bravery that it takes to write 6 books that Janine has written. And one of the goals I have and have had for a long time is to publish a book or 2 or 3. And so the second part of that question that brings me a lot of joy is knowing, for example, Janine and I have known each other a while, but I'm still learning things about her, right? And I did not know that she's written 6 books. And that makes me very happy to know, because now I feel like I've got this mentor who can guide me through that experience and give me bravery to take my words that I've written in so many journals and documents all over my home and actually put them towards something and self-publish possibly. So for me, it would be bravery. And a step closer to that is this course.
Great. What Bill is highlighting is this wonderful opportunity within ALDE to forge connections, not only with folks outside of the course, but the course itself. In our first stab of teaching this course last fall semester, what the participants truly appreciated was the ability to actually make connections in very unexpected ways during the breakout room sessions that we had in the course, and during their opportunities of actually connecting outside of the class as well. So it's my hope that the course itself will provide that foundation to actually do that. And then the course will give you the tools to hopefully feel empowered to expand upon that beyond the 4 weeks that we're together. Janine, what are your thoughts?
Oh my goodness. That's awesome, Bill. I'm excited to chat with you a little more about that. And I think that that's something else that, Michael, you just brought up, the power of connection through our ALDE experience gets me all jazzed up, because when somebody comes into your life, I truly believe it's for a reason. And I'm excited to see how we can connect people through this experience. But for me, something that I would like to unpack a little bit more is that word power, and maybe for a little bit of a different reason. I've spent my whole life working with young women and as players, being their coach. And it's been a joy to watch them kind of grow and morph. But as I get more kind of out there, now that I've retired from coaching and I'm able to kind of experience different things, I still feel that I can be better at empowering others to find their purpose, to have some extra self-confidence, to stand in their truth about what's going on in their life. And that's something that I'd like to push myself to unpack a little bit more, is how can I be better at empowering others? And so I feel like that really did jump out at me. And it's something that I took my little note that through this experience, I want to push myself and challenge myself to be better at empowering others to kind of realize their potential and the things that they're trying to accomplish in their life.
Great. Casey?
So I didn't see it on the list, but I think a value that I'd like to explore perhaps is taking an idea from its kernel, and if I can continue this metaphor, hopefully it doesn't get too bumpy, planting that kernel, having it grow, and then having so many more kernels coming from it that allow you to continue to grow and expand and develop. I think a lot of the work that I do here at Hopkins puts me together with fantastic colleagues, amazing students, really giving, generous, thoughtful alumni. But there's a creative aspect, I think, outside of the institution that I haven't ever really explored. And I wonder if there's an opportunity to explore that entrepreneurship, take an idea, really have it grow and develop and grow further. I don't know, maybe we'll see.
Excellent. So Bill highlights bravery as a value that he'd like to explore. Janine mentions how empowerment would play a major part in her process if she were to take the class. And Casey is thinking about entrepreneurship as a value to build and muscle in the summer potentially. The beauty about reflection and reflection in many ways serves as a key aspect of our 4 weeks together this summer, is that it actually gives us the space to have our creative minds, creative juices flowing, where you're now being able to, or you now have the foundation and the platform to actually realize these ideas in relationship with the fellow alumni that will be participating in this course with you. No longer are we relegated within the ideas that are festering and perhaps being articulated in our minds in ways that perhaps may not be too helpful if we keep it within our minds ourselves. This is actually giving us an opportunity to put life into the ideas that that are within us. So with that in mind, that moves us forward to the next module, which is titled Imagining Our Possible Lives. And in this framework, imagining our possible lives acknowledges the uncertainty that is always tied to our present conditions of how we engage in the world of work. This uncertainty, in many ways, can be troubling, but at the same time, if we are able to lean on to the resources that we have, being that these resources are our fellow alumni, it perhaps makes it a little easier for us to move forward. The next is that this Imagine Possible Lives framework uses this idea that we have the capacity to craft our lives in these very different and impactful ways. And we use the 3 possible lives framework to do that. And then the last is that it takes into account how our past and present can be leveraged in ways that make our future lives a little more accessible, right? And I'm going to discuss that further in the last module of telling our stories in more impactful ways. So these are the questions. Let's start with the first. What imagined life do you see yourself in the near future? And how is it similar or dissimilar to the work that you currently do?
Yeah,
Bill?
this is a fun one. This one gets the heart racing a little bit, and I think that's a good sign for me. When I stop and I think about that goal of publishing a book, what I do is I see myself in the near future completing that, because as I mentioned, I've got collections of writings and all sorts of notebooks, and part of that is just bringing it to one body of work. So that's like part of it. I think the other part is, for me at least, it's always been about the power of finishing something is really important to me. And so I think just publishing, just hitting like that sense of like you are self-published and it's out there, and I don't care if one person buys it or many people buy it. It's that sense of knowing that it's out there and it's there for people to read and possibly help. So that's kind of what I imagine in that near future. And what's interesting about how similar that is to some of the work I currently do is, as was mentioned in the intro, I run a podcast. And so people kind of think to me like, hey, you do episodes every week, like you do bodies of work every week and you release them and you edit them and you publish them. So it's kind of interesting that you struggle with this idea of actually publishing your written words as opposed to your spoken words. So in some ways, Michael, I think it is very similar. But what's interesting to me is the power of the written word, to me, holds so much more. And I think that's where it's slightly dissimilar. I could speak. I often speak on stages. I speak to people. I love that. That's my natural state of comfort. Sometimes I'm afraid to show my written words to the world.
Thank you, Bill. Casey?
So I want to start by saying I currently love the work that I'm doing and do not have any plans to make a major change in the near future. I got to design this course. How could I not be happy with that? But there was a time in my professional career where I thought, is higher ed going to continue to be in my future. I'm not sure. Maybe I want to consider going higher ed adjacent and be a recruiter for an organization, and be the person who interacts with colleges and universities to find the right interns for the intern program, or to go out and recruit the newest crop of graduates to come work, or potentially to move into ed tech and work with the companies that provide solutions to colleges and universities, and use my experience and background to be able to slightly pivot in that way, and just try a different angle of the world that I enjoy so much, but maybe want to get a different perspective on, or a different opportunity to try new things and try new challenges. So I'd say it's a little similar to staying in higher ed, because it still touches higher ed, but it's dissimilar enough because it removes you from that environment. There are different goals, different metrics, different partners, and I think a variety of different ways to interact with the populations that you find within a college or university.
How about you, Janine? I know you're a person of all trades.
Oh, Lordy. Well, one thing in the near future that I would really like to do is, over 30 years of coaching, I have had a chance to hold clinics and, coaches presentations and things like that. But I want to go big in the near future. I am imagining myself, because I believe that if you can force yourself to imagine something, or you can see it out there, you can kind of almost manifest it, right? And I would like to go all across the country, nationally, internationally, and be able to be in front of large groups, speaking to them in a way that can help them become the best version of themselves through the sport that they love. So encouraging people to keep being an athlete, no matter what that means for you in your life, and being able to touch lots of people, to encourage them, to support them, to empower them, going all across the world to become the best version of themselves through the sport that they love. And so that's kind of my pie in the sky. But the other thing that I was thinking about, Michael, that I'm really pumped about with this experience is, Bill and Casey were just talking about some things that maybe they're a little fearful of doing, or that they might want to consider. And I want to be a champion. I want to say to Bill, I'm going to call you and you're going to write your words down, and we're going to work on this book together. And I think that's something that makes me really excited about this ALDE experience, is that you're going to meet people, or you're going to hear somebody say out loud something that maybe they're a little fearful of, but then you're going to have somebody next to you on a Zoom screen that is going to say, I will be a champion for you, and I will help push you, or I will help challenge you. So that got me all excited listening to Bill and to Casey. If they're interested in pulling triggers, I want to be like, yes, you can do this.
Great, Janine. In many ways, you've answered all three questions for the Imagine Life exercise, which is fantastic, because in many ways, that's what the goal is for this course, to reflect and see how all these questions that will be tied to the exercises for these different modules will then give us an opportunity to move with intention, so that we can take the action that is necessary in making these imaginations that are associated with these possible lives into possible reality. So how do we actually bridge that through intentional reflection, and how do we actually make that happen by actually talking to the people who are already doing it through our One Hop alumni platform? I know Bill had talked about being this published individual, right? That is one of your goals as someone who's moving forward in their very dynamic career. Is there a life that you imagine that perhaps relates to being a published author, or not, that is perhaps not tied to the parameters that everyday life perhaps burdens us with? Is there that dream position?
Yeah, I am so glad that Janine said that if you can close your eyes and imagine it, then you're more than halfway there to manifest it. And so I'm going to close my eyes and say a dream job of mine has always been to be a songwriter. And I see the world through a songwriter's eyes. And I think when I connect back to my 13, 14, 15-year-old self, that's the person who was healed and helped through those stages of life. And so maybe it's because I always felt like you got to pay it forward and you got to pay back into those ecosystems that really helped you and saved you. But to be a songwriter is a dream job. And maybe the publishing of books or podcasts or scripts or whatever that is will get me closer to that. But saying it out loud is a completely nerve-wracking thing. But at the same time, there's now at least 5 other people who can hold me accountable to it. And maybe there's people listening who have connections into the publishing, songwriting world who can say, you know what, you're a pretty good writer. Let's give a crack at this. So thanks for asking that question, because I've never said it so publicly and it feels amazing.
Well, I really appreciate you being very candid and honest about your hopes and desires, Bill. In many ways, we're hoping that the course will foster that type of reflection and dialogue among alumni. And that's what's so fantastic about the One Hop alumni platform, where a fellow alumni can actually connect with people using a variety of keywords that are tied to the positions that all of you had just imagined. It now gives us a really robust platform to actually explore in a very explicit and embedded way these ideas that have just been relegated in our own heads. So how can we use this course to actually put everything in motion and into life? And it's my hope that we can do this through this ALDE course. Casey, how about you?
So I think tied to my entrepreneurship answer from before, I've been noticing recently in my community, we have a sort of broad neighborhood listserv, and people are always saying, like, can I borrow somebody's wheelbarrow? Does anybody have a ladder that's like 10 or 12 feet? Does somebody have a jigsaw that I could borrow? And I think my neighborhood, my little part of Baltimore, needs a tool library. And so I would love to be a tool librarian and sort of figure out what people need, find a place to store all those things, and then find a way to promote that to the community and make it available, and sort of be the center spoke or the hub of providing these actual physical tools to the community, and give people the resources that they need to get the jobs done in their yards or their homes, or their creative projects or things like that. I think it would feel really good to be like an everyday Santa Claus delivering gifts that people would eventually bring back because it's a library, but delivering gifts to all of the people who could use these tools to do the things that they want to do. So yeah, I don't think I've ever spoken that out loud. But yeah, that might be an imagined life that would be fun to pursue.
Well, thank you, Casey. That's a great segue to and a great metaphor to our next module on building connections. An actual tool shed as a resource hub for a community in many ways serves as a nice framework for actually thinking about how the One Hop alumni platform can serve as a nice baseline for forging and sustaining community within the alumni network, within undergrads who are interested in wanting to connect with alumni, and for participants who will be part of the ALDE course. Not only will they be connecting with fellow participants, they also have this wonderful resource to actually use in an effort to get to learn more about themselves in the process. So there's different layers that we're going to be exploring through ALDE so that we can actually use One Hop in a very mindful and purposeful way. So the third module is tied to this idea of building connections, right? So the reason why we spend a week in the ALDE course forging connections is that it allows us to see how our aspirations can actually manifest beyond the realm of ideas toward the people who are actually doing these positions in fields that we've only taken the time to think about and desire. The next is that this building connections framework allows for a realization that you aren't alone in this, and that you're a part of a larger ecosystem of support, as Bill had highlighted earlier. That's what former participants last fall really appreciated, where they were able to connect with alumni that they otherwise wouldn't connect if they weren't part of this course. It allows you to actually take a step back and say, hey, I'm currently in this job. I love it. There's times where I don't love it, but now I actually can have a community of support where I can bounce off these ideas with fellow alumni that are a mix of candid thoughts and feelings. It's just a whole range of things that participants can actually share, so that it no longer is relegated within ourselves. And I think the most important aspect of this building connections framework is that it actually allows us to turn ideas into actions that will hopefully align with the lives that we're imagining, and will then give us a more substantive way of thinking about how we can move forward in exploring our possible lives in the immediate future. So with these questions in mind, I'd love to entertain Bill, Janine, and Casey with this first question. Is there an idea that you've had or currently have that was explored further through the support of someone or others? What insight did they share, and what was the process like?
I love this question because it makes me think. By starting at home first, right? And the reason I started home is because I have a very supportive spouse. And one of the things I have to remember, we all have to remember, is that as we grow our network, sometimes you don't want to necessarily overlook the people that are literally closest to you. And the idea that's coming to mind for me that was explored further through the support of my spouse was in relation to the podcast that I run. About 2 years ago, we sat down and I was kind of putting together the next season of the podcast and coming up with guests. And it was my husband that suggested, hey, why don't you ask one of your favorite authors of all time to be a guest on the podcast? And I thought about it and I said, well, what if he says no? And he says, if he says no, he says no. But what if he says yes? And it turned out that that author, Thomas Mallon, who wrote the book Fellow Travelers, among others, said yes. And I interviewed with him at the end of 2022 in his home in Washington, D.C., and it was amazing. And then New Year's came around for 2023, and I was putting together the new season, and we did the same exercise. And my spouse said, close your eyes and imagine 3 people at our dinner table. And name the first person that comes to mind who you would love to have at the dinner table or on your podcast. And that person was Commander Scott Kelly, the astronaut who spent over a year in space. And so I reached out to Scott Kelly, and guess what? He said yes. So I share that story from the standpoint of the idea that I had was to invite luminaries, invite people who have incredible stories and change. That was further explored through the support of my spouse to say, why not go for your heroes? Like, why not ask people that you really admire and that are heroes to you? And I did just that. And here we are with 2 people on that list checked off. So thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's incredible that that they said yes to your inquiry, and I really appreciate that you had taken the time to sift through all the different emotions that are tied to actually, taking a step or taking a leap. Oftentimes, a lot of that is based on, and this is based on my own experience, where there are these moments where you're not necessarily confident in actually making that step. A lot of it for me is based on this sort of fear-based approach to how I see things. And I really like how you were able to sort of sift through that and lean onto a person that is your spouse that you admire in terms of their insight and how they can actually help reshape your process of making things actually happen. So that's my hope with the actual course as well, where we actually do a deep dive on what our current beliefs are and how it's helped us or not helped us, and how other folks within the course itself can actually help reshape how we see ourselves and how we see the world so that we can move forward in a more empowered way. How about you, Janine?
Oh boy, so many things. Well, to be honest with you, I think that this idea of how you could tap into others to help support what you're trying to do is really at the basis of this building connection segment. And since retiring, I've had a number of people reach out because one of my main goals, as I mentioned earlier, is how can I positively impact others? And I was approached by a friend of mine who was interested in a startup of creating a sports app that's just not kind of defined in one lane, but it's all encompassing with helping young people set goals, figure out their values. What are they all about? Anti-bullying, uplifting support. And I was like, yeah, I think I would love to look into something like that. And their belief in me being a value add to this really cool thing that they're looking into gave me confidence. So I think that's kind of neat in when you think about putting a bunch of Hopkins alums on a Zoom together in a virtual room and allowing them to play off of each other and learn from each other is kind of mind-blowing to me, because when I think about our Hopkins alums and what they are doing currently to change the world, I mean, this question you have on this slide, are there any Hopkins alumni you'd like to connect with that's related to your own aspirations and goals? Yeah, like all 200,000 of them, because they're just unbelievable, this family that we have. So anyway, I just think that I can't wait to kind of continue to explore things when I have someone else telling me you're going to be a value add.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that, Janine. Yeah, we definitely can't stress it enough in terms of how much power and insight and perspective our alumni have in the diverse industries and fields that they're in. There's different ways of connecting with alumni that I've been able to see with current undergraduate students and alumni who participated in the course last fall semester. They were able to, of course, connect with alumni in this very professional way, where they had questions that were actually tied to the positions that they were curious about, but didn't necessarily have the content to actually move forward with confidence. So there's that professional aspect, but there's also this more candid approach that many of the participants and our current students have when they use OneHop, where they're actually able to ask questions that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate in let's say, a job interview, or connecting with someone that you have an interest in wanting to apply for a position in the company that they're affiliated with. There's a candidness and a level of vulnerability that a lot of our participants actually immerse themselves in, that gives them an opportunity to actually connect in these very real and raw ways. So it's my hope that our participants will be able to move forward with that using the framework of questions and exercises that we have in the course. Casey, how about you?
Sure. I actually did this over the last couple of years during the pandemic. I perfected a salsa recipe, and as I shared it with friends and family and neighbors, they kept telling me, "You should sell this. You should sell this." And so I looked into it. I started talking to vendors at farmers markets. I started talking to people who were also selling like tomato-based products. I started doing my research. I talked to somebody from the health department in Baltimore City about everything that would go into that. The short version of the story is that the laws regulating tomatoes and the preparation and serving of them in a food in Maryland is exceptionally onerous. So it didn't really go anywhere. But in terms of this question, I spoke to so many people who had different perspectives and different thoughts and different ideas about the ways that I could take this and potentially launch, different ways to market, different ways to develop that product or develop other products. And those conversations were not something I ever expected having, like deep, in-depth conversations with strangers about condiments is not something that I ever thought was going to be on my list of things that I would do in my life. But I did, and it was fascinating, and it was really enjoyable. And it's a shame that selling tomatoes in Maryland is so difficult in the form of salsa specifically. But I know now so much more about something that really interested me for a time, and I was able to build a network of people. And if I was going to turn to OneHop for this and investigate further, I'm sure there are people with experience in retail, with experience in marketing and communications, with experience in a number of legal matters. There might even be people in food production on OneHop who I would be able to speak to. Thinking of OneHop as a resource feels like, even though I've put this idea to bed, it feels like I could very easily start chasing some loose ends of this idea around a bit further.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned all these possible alums that you would connect with to learn more about this strong interest of yours. There is a diverse set of expertise that are able and and willing to actually support fellow alumni in whatever way you decide to design your exploration for the ALDE course. We, as the ALDE team, have developed a series of exercises that will help you do that. And this diagram here is one example of that, where we use a concentric ring model with a set of guidelines that offers participants the ability to visually map the different types of stakeholders or potential stakeholders that they'd like to connect with, and the ways in which these stakeholders will eventually be interconnected with one another in this very complex and dynamic web. So in many ways, the building connections exercise will, one, support you in connecting with alumni with these diverse perspectives, but at the same time, acknowledge the unexpectedness that is typically tied to forging these connections, where you might meet someone with these clear goals and questions in mind, but at the end of the meeting, you might realize that it had taken a pivot that was quite unexpected, but also quite entertaining and helpful for you. So with that said, I'd love for us to go into the next module and last module that's titled Telling Your Story. Okay, so in the building connections format, we stress the importance of actually forging and sustaining connections with fellow alumni using the OneHop platform, and forging connections with fellow alumni that will be participating in the course. In this last module, we're very much interested in having students and participants be aware of how their past and present experiences can be leveraged and redesigned in ways that align with a participant's future aspirations. So in many ways, we get stuck in how we tell our present and past experiences and circumstances, because that's how we've been able to see ourselves in this world. But the hope is when you're able to forge these connections and have your ideas that have been primarily relegated in your mind actually play out in the world, it creates a new, or it elicits a set of or a form of a dynamism that will hopefully give you the tools to move forward in these really cool and interesting ways. The Telling Your Story framework also situates your intentional story via the recognition of how an evaluator from a particular context will read your past and present experiences. So, for example, when we get stuck in how we tell our story, we don't necessarily take the time to actually say, hey, does this actually make sense? Will this new person that is actually evaluating my professional experiences understand my past in ways that are impactful? So we have a bunch of exercises that encourages participants to unpack that in more intentional ways. So with these questions, it's my hope that it actually has or gives us the opportunity to see how the previous modules that we had just discussed as a group are actually interconnected with the other modules. So with that in mind, based on the first bulleted point, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how a skill set or value from a past experience is related or has been leveraged with a a future position that you are envisioning to wanting to apply to? Is there a skill set or value from a past experience that you'd like to leverage in ways that align with your imagined life?
Yeah, I think, Michael, this brings me, just seeing the words, the way you wrote it brings me a lot of hope, because one of the things I don't give myself enough credit for is the fact that, having run a podcast for 7 years, I've taught myself all about sound engineering. I've taught myself editing. I've taught myself about how to weave compositions in. And whether I knew it or not, kind of the little kid in me who wanted to be a DJ and the teenager me who wanted to be a songwriter is sort of patting myself on the back, right? And saying, hey, you taught yourself this stuff from early on. And now you get to use it, or at least call upon it, for potential use in a songwriter, producer, A&R rep. I'm already thinking about people I can reach out on One Hop that maybe work for BMI or ASCAP. And I think it's interesting, the news that we're experiencing this week with the writer's strike, right? I mean, my sort of subtext of my role today is leading change in the era of AI. Well, AI is causing writers to go on strike right now because they're not getting their value and their credit. So I imagine that would be a fascinating discussion with a potential songwriter or writer to talk about AI and how that's impacting them. So already I could see the bridges and connections.
Great. Thank you, Bill. How about you, Janine?
Well, I was just thinking as Bill was speaking, something that makes me really excited about this whole experience is, again, forcing yourself to sit and prioritize what you might want to do with your life, being able to reflect. I know that way back in the day when I was still in college and right after I graduated, I went right into coaching as an assistant coach at Loyola, but I also worked in their Center for Professional Development as an intern and over my 3 years of college. And we did a lot of kind of giving seminars to businesses, whether it was communication, presentations, leadership, and all of that stuff really played into kind of how I crafted my values and myself as a coach and my style as a coach. And now I find that I'm coming back full circle to a lot of the things that I learned from Doris Van Doren at Loyola College back in the day about giving presentations and capturing an audience in doing something like this that Casey was, kind enough to allow me to get involved with. So I think for those of us having to think back on some of the jobs through, that can really come full circle if you allow your heart and your mind to be open to recapture some of those experiences, and then think about how that can propel you into your next steps and your next chapter. So that was just something that came into my brain as I was listening to Bill talk.
Great. I love how the both of you are responding with not just the first question in mind, but the last two. This is fantastic. How about you, Casey?
Yeah, I would say this is an admitted growth area for me, telling my story. I think because I've done work in the world of career and ILLD, I think the first three parts I get. It sort of resonates with me. It's baked into my career. But this telling your story is something that I absolutely need help with. And so being able to rely on a group of folks that I'm working with and working beside and get ideas about how to tell my story and when to tell my story and that kind of thing would be really useful to me. I don't know if when I was thinking about being the salsa guy, if I was doing a great job telling my story to the people that I was working with in terms of my ideas. If I want to be the tool librarian, I think that's something that I'm going to have to work on and hopefully improve so I can kind of condense what I am interested in so that when I'm meeting with people, they get a really good sense of like, this is my goal, this is how I hope to achieve it, this is what I plan to do with it. So this would be the piece of the course where I would just be counting the minutes until we got here so that I could do a deep dive and dig in and figure out how to tell my story about I guess becoming a tool librarian.
That's excellent, Casey. I think what you and Janine and Bill highlight in terms of crafting impactful stories has to do with the ways in which stories matter in relationship to those who are hearing the story, right? So a key aspect of the Telling Your Story module is predicated on thinking about our stories in relationship with the folks who are actually hearing it. So, for example, if one of your imagined lives is to be a published author, right? And you're wanting to have this work be published in a publishing company based in New York City. The goal for you, Bill, would be to see how your story can be in more alignment with the people who actually have the capacity to make that happen. So by actually doing the exercises that are tied to ALDE, where you're actually talking to the people who have done it already, it now gives you more cannon fodder to work with when you're actually exploring ways to make it happen, right? So it's our hope that, and Casey, you highlight this as well, like when you're actually talking to the people who are already doing it, you now are able to move with more information in ways where you can actually feel more confident in seeing how this curiosity can be realized.
So I would like to open up the Q&A portion of the program. I see there's some questions coming in. I encourage anyone who is watching to ask questions on the Hopkins at Home Watch Now screen. We will all do our best to respond to as many questions as we can in the time that's available. But the one sort of two questions, and Michael, I'm going to put you on the spot. And hopefully it isn't too much to smash these two questions together. But there was a question about how the material in the course builds upon the material from the Design Your Life book by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. And then there was also a question about the course format and how participants will engage over the 4 weeks. Do you think you could do those both at once, Michael?
Yeah, I could try. So, yeah, I'm glad the Designing Your Life book was mentioned. In many ways, the ALDE experience or the Alumni Life Design Experience course is premised on the Designing Your Life book. I think one of the key elements that we borrow, if I were to highlight one of them, would be the Odyssey plans that the Designing Your Life book encourages readers to do. For the Hopkins equivalent, we've been able to rebrand it as the Imagining Your Three Possible Lives exercise. So that's one similarity, but the key difference in the ALDE course is that the Three Imagined Lives exercise gives us an opportunity to find interconnection between the three lives, while also recognizing how one life, for example, can be this sort of audacious or outlandish life that we haven't necessarily taken the time to explore. That's one difference. Another difference has to do with thinking about design thinking frameworks in general. Design thinking frameworks are helpful, and at the same time, there's a lot of language behind it that may not be as accessible to participants or readers, given the short amount of time that many of us have. The beauty about the ALDE course is that we've been able to diffuse and alter a lot of the language that makes it more accessible for participants who are short on time. That's the benefit of the course, where we actually zoom in. We take bits and pieces of design thinking, but we create a language that makes it quick and easy for participants to use so that they can reflect and then take action. I think I only answered the first part of the question. What's the second?
Yeah, so the second was the course format. So I'll prime you a little bit here. We've got 4 weeks, 2 meetings a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, in the evenings. And each week will cover one of the 4 topics that we went through today. Be curious, imagine 3 possible lives, build connections, tell your story. So the first day of each week, the class will do some work all together about be curious or imagine 3 possible lives, whatever each week is. And then the second day of that week, we would do some group work, would you call it, or getting people to get together and sort of think outside of what was discussed in the class to build upon that. How would you define how the sort of flow of the week goes?
Yeah, thank you for that, Casey. If I were to add to that, the Tuesday courses would be an introduction to all the types of frameworks and exercises that are tied to each respective module. So in many ways, it's going to be very content based with breakout room exercises that will happen in between these introductions to the content that's related to each module. So that will give students or participants a nice foundation to work with the hope that students use Tuesday or Wednesday to actually unpack and reflect, figure out strategy, even test things out. And then on Thursday, when we return, that's when we actually use our insights as participants, where we actually reflect on the work that we had done the day before, and explore next action steps that can happen during the weekend and the Monday before the next module. So in many ways, what would be important to stress now is that the 4-week course gives a really wonderful foundation for having us reflect and take action that's related to the different modules. And then while you're testing everything out during these 4 weeks, you're able to get all this feedback during our Thursday sessions together, so that you can then test that out afterward. So it's our hope that the 1-month experience gives you an opportunity to explore, unpack, and then move forward with all this information so that you can make more informed and sound action in the long run.
Great, thank you, Michael. There's a question about, please share some online, Hopkins specific online networking platforms you would recommend for building networks. First and foremost, OneHop. onehop.jhu.edu. OneHop Alumni is available to all Hopkins alums, and there are thousands of Hopkins alumni on the OneHop platform currently. A variety of geographies, industries, interests, identities, affinities, backgrounds. It's a really great group of alums that you can find on there, and I think anybody that you find on there is probably willing to network, chat, talk, answer questions. There is, of course, LinkedIn. I'll say this about LinkedIn: it's great at doing what it does. It has algorithms that will help you find jobs, find recruiters, find information. The response rate on LinkedIn usually hovers around the teens, and the response rate on OneHop usually is 60% or above. So if you really are hoping to speak to other Hopkins folks, I would absolutely recommend using onehop.jhu.edu. But LinkedIn, it is a tool that almost everyone uses, and so you shouldn't forego LinkedIn even if the response rate is a little bit lower there. There was another question about guidance for people who are considering a career change. And I think this is one that we could probably all answer because we've all done this. How do you weigh the sunk cost of years spent on a certain track versus the idea of starting at square one all over again, like starting a salsa empire?
Yeah, Casey, I'm happy to jump in here. I mean, it's a question I wonder as well, right? I'm currently an IT director, and I told all of you that I want to be a songwriter. Maybe not like one in one, but what I would encourage the person who asked the question to think about is, and the word adjacent came up before. I think, Michael, you mentioned that word, right? So for example, how do I think about tech adjacent, right? If I'm in tech, and obviously every company is now a technology company, but what is the tech adjacent pathway I could get into music or songwriting or production? I think one way to think about that is to sort of draw concentric circles, like we saw in that diagram before. If I'm here, what are the orbits around me that take me closer to that new said career, new industry? And if you draw those lines, some of them are dashed lines, some of them are direct lines, and then you use something like a OneHop, or even, as you said, Casey, LinkedIn, you can start to see that diagram filling in. And what I would encourage people to do is treat it like an apprenticeship, right? Let it be a craftsman apprenticeship. As I mentioned, I knew nothing about sound production, audio production, podcasting. I've taught myself, and now I've been at it for 7 years. Well, now people are reaching out to me and saying, hey, can you teach me about certain things that you learned? So before you know it, you follow your passion becomes your profession, and then people will invite you. And then one last point, the reason I'm at Microsoft today is because a Microsoft person heard my podcast. So chase your passions. You never know what doors it will open.
Yeah. Related to what Bill just said, I was on the drive. I was actually in California yesterday visiting parents, and I was listening to my most favorite podcast is called Hidden Brain. I love your podcast too as well, Bill. But in this episode, they actually talk about this, and I wish I remembered the professor that was interviewed, but they essentially talked about how humans are risk averse, right? We actually default to what we are used to, what is safe, right? And that's what we desire in many respects. But what he advocated for was to have people realize that if there is a desire out there, it essentially is tied to your happiness, right? So if humans are risk averse, the best thing to do, as Bill highlighted, is to take these many steps, right? That actually encourage habit formation, right? So if you're able to sort of say, hey, I could maintain this life now because it's filled with comfort, it's secure, it keeps me safe, but at the same time, how can I actually insert this imagined life that in many ways gives me a sense of joy that this current position does not, right? So if you're able to sort of do this in increments and then add to it in more as the future progresses, then hopefully you'll reach a point where you're in a life that was once desired but is now realized. I'll send you, if you could send me your email address, I could send you that podcast.
Michael, just to follow up, I did see another question talked about some different book suggestions. And we wanted to share that in the Life Design Experience, we did create a guidebook for you all to be able, for the participants, to be able to jot things down to revisit. But we have suggested readings. One of my favorite books is Grit by Angela Duckworth. And that kind of speaks to this same question. A little bit of making change is about a leap of faith. And I think that when we are forced to reflect, and hopefully that's what this experience will do for all of the participants, myself included, when we're really forced to reflect on kind of where we are and where we want to go, there is that fear in the middle of making that change, or like Michael just said, we're a little risk averse. But if our desire for that extra joy or happiness or the positives that we think are going to come from that change, you almost want to allow yourself the time it's going to take you to get to this space where you know that leap of faith or that happiness, that joy that's on the other side is outweighing the feeling safe or the feeling of I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just going to stay right where I am. And that's a very personal journey for everyone. And we're hopeful that we can be on the front end of that journey to help people just to get to that space where they say, I'm ready to take that leap of faith and I'm ready to try something a little bit different. But just like Michael said, we're not advocating for anyone to go like full on tomorrow, you're going to make this crazy change. We want to have a little bit of a process there that does take a little time. So we all need to give ourselves a little grace in that time it might take. But honestly, starting to think about it, you can feel the butterflies in your stomach to start to think about the excitement behind what that adjustment, that little leap of faith might look like. So hopefully that helps a little bit too.
Yeah, Janine, if I can also add, I was so excited when I saw the curricula because all the books recommended in this series are on my bookshelf, and they're some of my favorite books, evident in the fact that I have Grit here on my desk. I would also add 3 others for folks that are interested. One is The Artist Way by Julia Cameron. Another's called Deviate by Bo Lotto. And the third would be Essentialism by Greg McKeown. So those are 3 very different books, but each of those books in their unique way has given me the courage to get closer to that life desired. And then understanding what you need to do on a habit forming basis. So even when I sometimes get to the point where I lose that sense of courage, I revisit those books and it brings me right back to that point of strength.
Thanks, Bill. I'd like to very rapidly move through this final question. It's one of my favorites. I hear it from alums all the time. I hear it from students all the time. I hear it from friends and family all the time. When it comes to building connections, does networking ever get easier? It feels so awkward to suddenly jump into in-person social situations. Do you have any tips or tricks? So first, I will say, I do networking for a living. It is my job to be a networker. It is my job to be a net weaver. I do not like it, and if I could avoid doing it, I would. But I'm pretty good at it. So I will say, no, I don't think it ever gets easier. But with practice, it hopefully gets more comfortable. My tip is to remember that the person that you're talking to is a fully formed human being with their own experiences and backgrounds. And us human beings really love talking about ourselves. So if you can ask enough questions of the other person that they do all the talking, it makes things a lot easier. Bill, do you have a quick tip?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, despite the fact that I speak on stages and lead teams of many, I'm an introvert. And another book I forgot to mention is the book called Quiet by Susan Cain. That book changed my life because I realized that being an introvert is a superpower. So what I would share with folks as far as a tip is understand how you restore, because networking by nature is a very giving experience, and we get depleted very quickly. So whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, spend time understanding not just how you perform in the world, but how you restore in the world. That is critical. And then strike that balance. And then, as my father used to say, the Lord gave us 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth. Use it in that ratio.
Janine?
Yeah, that's a mic drop right there. So I'm just going to retweet what Bill just said. I will tell you that I am an extrovert and I still can feel awkward and uncomfortable. So I think we just have to give ourselves a little grace and maybe recognize that the person we're trying to network with may feel just as awkward or just as shy or maybe not as comfortable. So I always love to just make the person next to me look good, like make sure you're being uplifting and positive. A smile goes a long way, right? A little smile goes a long way. So those are some tips that I would share.
You want to close this out, Michael?
Well, I have one recommendation as well to relate to what Janina and Bill had just mentioned. There is a book by Marissa Franco. She teaches at the University of Maryland, titled Platonic, where she looks at the ways in which our attachment styles are, in many ways determine how we connect with others and how we make friends. So if you have the time to reflect on your attachment style using her work, she's been interviewed in a bunch of podcasts as well, then I would recommend Marissa Franco's work.
Thank you. And thanks to all of our panelists and all of our attendees for joining us for this Hopkins at Home. For more information about the Alumni Life Design Experience, ALDE, and to register for the 4-week course, visit odyssey.jhu.edu. A follow-up email will be shared with all attendees that will include a recording of the program and a link to our Hopkins at Home and the complete alumni event schedule. You can always find and register for upcoming programs at events.jhu.edu. Have a great afternoon, and thank you, everyone, again.